Hello and welcome to Still Standing. I'm Shannon, I'm your host, and today I am so happy to have with me my friend Adrienne, who is here to talk about her recovery from addiction and to share her story in hopes that it will bring hope and encouragement and inspiration to others. She and I have a very similar story. We have bonded over that throughout the years, and I appreciate her willingness to be so open and vulnerable because I know that her story is going to inspire you. And if anyone you know is struggling, or if you are struggling, Adrienne is a shining example of what recovery looks like. And when I say that, I don't mean recovery has to be a perfect straight line. It's just the idea that it is possible. If I can do it, if Adrienne can do it, you can do it too. Adrienne, thank you so much for being here today with me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Shannon.
I love you. So Adrian, I would love to start by having you share about your background, really whatever, as it pertains to your journey, wherever you'd like to start. You are an incredible speaker, and I'm just going to let you take it away.
To give you a little sense of who I am, I was a chain smoking, tattoo covered, sexually promiscuous, suicidally depressed, atheist Jew that was eventually transformed by Jesus.
That's a
That's
good way
my
to put
story.
it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I would love to sort of break that all down and,
Yeah,
what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, and how that all transpired and came to be.
perfect. All right, take it away.
So I was born and raised in Southern California by two very loving secular Jewish parents. And they really weren't religious. But we did start attending synagogue when I was young, really a very small child, more to develop community and to find, other young Jewish families who were in a similar stage of life. And we started attending a synagogue, and we did that for many years. And I always enjoyed it, but it didn't really have any spiritual significance for our family. It was more a community thing, an activity. Um, and by the time I was 4 years old, I mean, very young, I was 100% rational, common sense, don't believe in fairy tales. And in fact, I came to my dad at a very young age and I said, Dad, look, just be straight with me. Okay. Tell me the truth. Is there Santa Claus? And he was so taken aback that he told me, no, there's not. And instead of being disappointed as a 4-year-old, I was actually relieved because I said, that didn't make sense to me. It's not logical. It's not, it's like this fantasy that this one person can fly around the world in one night and leave all these presents for all these kids. And how does that work actually? And how does he fit down the chimney, and all that stuff. So I actually, always loved things to be very clear and rational, and that was my whole life, starting at a really young age. So by the time I was about 8 or 9 years old, I came to my parents and I said, I don't understand why I have to go to synagogue to learn about fairy tales, to learn about Adam and Eve and Noah's Ark and this made up stuff. I don't want to go anymore. And because it didn't really have a whole lot of significance for us, they just agreed and they just said, okay, well, then we'll stop going. And so from that point on, I really had no religion of any kind in my life. Um, and no real morality. There was no sort of guiding um, right or wrong other than what I was, innately created with as a human being that like exists inside of me that I think we all do have innately. Um, but by the time I hit 12, 13, 14, um, my whole identity was wrapped up in getting approval and attention and affirmation. I think because I wasn't getting any meaning or bigger purpose in life. And so I was trying to fill this hole and, being popular, being pretty, being seen, those kinds of things validated me and they felt good. And so I became a very rebellious young child around the age of 12, 13, 14, and started getting into, smoking and drinking and drugs and being sexual with boys at a really young age because I wanted to be a cool girl. And cool girls are popular and cool girls are pretty and cool girls get attention. And that sort of became my driving force for the rest of my adolescence, really.
Oh, man. I relate so much with so much of that. Uh, it's I think that we do that validation seeking is such an addiction, and that's my core addiction too. So I appreciate you sharing that because as I said before we started recording, I really think it's important that people understand that addiction isn't just alcohol. It might involve alcohol, it might involve drugs or spending or these kinds of things, but that validation in itself can be an addiction. And I think sometimes people sort of dismiss it as, oh, that's not an addiction. That's just something you like to do. But it is extremely painful. And we'll go into that as you tell
Yeah.
your story of I think people don't understand how deeply painful that can be. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do, but
Well, I mean,
yeah.
the other thing that's crazy about it is it starts out so subtle,
Yes.
right? Like this sounds, I mean, and I thought at the time, it's harmless,
Yeah.
and even my parents were not neglectful parents. My parents were not bad parents. They were very attentive and very loving. But, they didn't really know what to do with me. They didn't really know how to give me boundaries. They would try to sort of, you know, put in place, a guideline of, you can't go here, can't go there. And I would just lie to them and I would just sneak out and I would, kind of get in trouble, but they realized that life just got along a lot better and easier if they sort of let me do what I wanted when I wanted as a teenager. If that meant partying and drinking and doing drugs and having sex, they didn't really like it, but they were sort of okay with it. And they thought, well, how far gone can she be? I mean,
Mhm.
she's still sleeping in her bed every night. She's here at home. She's getting good grades in school. It's like, how harmful is it really? I
Right.
think was their sort of mentality. And of course, at the time, if you had told me that any of that was harmful, I would have been like, please, give me a break. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was just having a blast. I mean, it didn't feel painful until much, much, much later in life when all of the repercussions, like came to fruition. And as a teenager, while I was, the popular party girl doing, sex and drugs and rock and roll, I was having a blast. I just was having the time of my life. It didn't hurt. It didn't become an addiction and create pain until later, but it was all a progression. So that way that it started, was part of that, exactly what you're saying. It's like it's part of that addiction of filling that void. And then, because that's not healthy, and it's a progressive disease, right? So each time you do it, each iteration, it's the consequences are more severe. It takes more to get that hit. The hit doesn't last as long. You have to do it again. And it really, you like, that's what happened to me. So continuing on with the story, basically, I go off to college. Um, by this time, I was, I guess, lucky in the sense that I went to a party school. I went to UC Santa Barbara. Um, but I was over partying. I mean, I had been doing it since I was 13. So by the time I got to college, I was ready to have intellectual discussions with my peers and professors. And I sort of went to the wrong school for that because everybody was doing keg stands and bong rips. And I wasn't interested. I was like, dude, I've been doing this for years already, but these kids, like normal, a lot of normal kids, they had curfews in high school.
Mhm.
They weren't drinking and doing drugs and partying at 14, 15, 16 like I was. So um, I kind of became a loner in college. I became very intellectual and just, sort of, but again, it I was lucky in that it wasn't drugs and alcohol that were my addiction, but it was attention and approval and relationship and sex and sex not in and of itself. I think that's a misconception about sex addiction, is that like, oh, you're addicted to sex, like you have to have sex. It's like, well, no, I'm using sex as a manipulative tool, as a way to get attention and to fill that hole in my heart. If I use sex because, this guy seems interested in me and I want him to like me, I want him to validate me, I want to feel like I'm worthy, I want to feel like I'm beautiful, I want to feel like I'm worth the time and attention. So if I give my body away and that brings that attention to me, that is sex addiction. You know what I mean? Like using sex as a way to fill that hole. Um, and so that is what I did, starting honestly from the time I was 12. It was just like an ongoing thing throughout middle school, high school, college. I was always in, not always, I was often in long-term relationships, but I was almost never faithful. So I would have my boyfriend who would give me that, that sense of like love and meaning, and feeling good about myself, but then it wasn't enough. So I'd have to go seek it elsewhere from somebody else and have one night stands and hook up with other people. And I was always kind of looking over my shoulder for, is there, a better option? Is there a better guy, that'll make me feel happier, or, will give me that hit? So I was always looking, but I never really had a sense of like guilt or remorse or, sin or anything like that. I just didn't. The very, very first time I cheated, there was that innate thing in me that knew right from wrong, that knew I should not cheat on my boyfriend. And I did try to stop the guy. I was 16 years old. I was in high school. I was on a youth leadership conference and I met a boy there and he was, trying to initiate things with me. And I sort of, pushed him aside and I said, I can't, I have a boyfriend. And he gave me this face and this look and was just sort of like, he will literally never find out. Like, we are in another state. We are strangers. We do not live in the same place. And I just sort of went, oh, okay, you
Yeah,
know,
makes sense.
yeah. And just gave right in. It's
Mhm.
like there was that thing in me, that innate thing that knows right from wrong. But it was just, to get that hit, to get that attention, it was very, very easy to push that aside, to be convinced that, you know, that wasn't a genuine feeling or a genuine thought about right and wrong. So that also set the pattern, for many, many, many years going forward, of being unfaithful and cheating and always, looking over my shoulder and jumping from guy to guy to guy to guy. And I did that all the way up through my 20s. I did meet a young man in grad school after I graduated college, and we were in our early 20s and we started dating. And I thought that, again, I thought that he would make me happy. We were in a long term relationship. Then it didn't make me happy. And so I looked elsewhere. I was unfaithful. Um, he found out about it. He said, if you ever do this to me again, I will not tolerate it. I will leave you. And I, of course, begged and pleaded, of course, I'll never, ever do it again. We got married. I thought that would make me happy. It did not. And I went into a severe depression for the first time in my life. I was very, very depressed. I wanted to kill myself and I felt trapped and I thought that I hated my life. I had no meaning, no purpose. The marriage wasn't making me happy. I just felt completely lost. And looking back on it, I think that I had three different choices at the time. I could have gotten healthy, which my ex-husband was begging me to do. Please go to therapy. Please go to support groups. Please, get medication, do the work and put in the effort to get healthy. I was not interested in that in the least, did not want to get healthy. I could have killed myself, which I fantasized about constantly. I was just, suicidal ideation, just wanting to not be alive, laying in a dark room all day, just miserable, making my husband miserable. It was a real bad time. And the third option was acting out. So that is what I chose to do. So I picked up the phone and I called the ex-boyfriend and I started having an affair. And man, oh man, did that work
Mhm.
in, in the, instant gratification, temporary fix. Whoo, like it literally felt like doing drugs. The high that it gave me was, especially after being suicidal and depressed, to then shooting up. I mean, it literally was like, I felt like I was on drugs. And I went on a total bender. I just went on a total bender and destroyed my whole life. My ex-husband and I had a business together. I completely, blew that up and threw that out the window. I threw away my marriage, my family, my in-laws, that family, my ex-husband's family that had essentially adopted me into their family, threw that all away. Um, and I just didn't care. I did not care. I was so out of my mind crazy. This is again that like progressive progressive disease where like what sex and love addiction looks like when you're 16, 18, 20 looks different than when you're 30. And now there's marriage and family involved and business and money. And, I made a big, big mess. But I didn't care because I finally felt better until it all came crashing down. Because it can't last, the addiction, the high, it never lasts. And then at some point there's like the morning when you wake up like stone cold sober and you look around the room and you go, what have I done? And I suddenly wanted back the life that I had with my ex-husband, the life that I had been trying to escape from and run away from for a year. And this man who I told myself I don't love him, I shouldn't have married him, I want nothing to do with him. I'm now convinced that I want him back and I want back the life that we had. And that is when I really, really hit rock bottom because I was like, there is something wrong with me. Like that is the thinking of a crazy person. I am a crazy person and I'm not some cute 22-year-old party girl anymore. I'm approaching 30 and about to go through a divorce. This is not the life that I had in mind for myself at this age, right? So after hitting that bottom, that's what finally got me to say, okay, I give up. I don't know how to do this life thing. This thing I've been doing, this jumping around from guy to guy and trying to, find my soulmate or whatever, like this is not working and I need help. So that is when I found these support groups for people struggling with sex and love addiction. And I fricking crawled in on my hands and knees. And Shannon, I don't know if you were there that night. My
Yeah.
first,
Yeah. I don't know if it was your first night, but we were on the same page.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that first that first group that I went to, man, oh man, I just I think I was like radiating anger
Yeah.
and shame. And I just sat there with my arms folded and tears coming down my face. And I just felt like such a loser and so angry about, I can't believe this is my life. I cannot believe this is my life. And at the end of that first meeting, they asked if there were, people in the room who were willing to support and sponsor others. And There were like maybe one or two hands that went up. And I walked up to a woman and came up to her with like tears in my eyes. And I said, "Can you help me?" And she sort of, looked at me and she was like, "Yeah, I can help you." And, we exchanged numbers and she was like, "Get this book, do these journal entries," and like, took me under her wing. She really did. And I was in such a desperate state that I was just willing to do whatever was asked of me, whatever I was told to do, because I had come to the end of my rope. It was either this or death, you know? Um, because like I said, there were those three options. It was get healthy, commit suicide, or act out. Well, I tried acting out. I could still kill myself. So I guess the only other option is to try this getting healthy thing, whatever that means and whatever that looks like. So that's what I started to do. And this woman said to me, "You have to get some kind of spiritual practice. I don't care what it is. It could be anything. Try a bunch of different stuff. Try Buddhist stuff, try Jewish stuff, try Christian stuff, try yoga, meditation, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just try anything and everything, and whatever feels good, do more of that." And even though I, sort of protested because, "No, no, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any of that spirituality stuff. That's not for me." I was just in so much pain that I said, "Fine, if that's what I have to do, just tell me what to do and I'll do it." But even then, it was very uncomfortable. It was very comfortable, uncomfortable, and I was very resistant, and I couldn't even pray out loud. Alone in my car, in my apartment, could not do it. It was so humiliating and embarrassing and stupid and made up fairy tale stuff. And I told this woman, my mentor, I told her that after like weeks of, doing journal entries and all these things. And she said, "Okay, fine, then say this. Say, I'm all alone and there's no one here and I'm all by myself and I'm only doing this because my sponsor told me to."
That was
And
smart.
that's how my prayer life began. That's how I began praying.
Wow. I got so choked up listening to your story, even though I already know it, because it's, oh man, it's my story. It's so, so similar. Blowing up my marriage, having an affair, the whole thing. And ending up in the support groups. And yes, I remember going in there. I could barely breathe. I wanted to be gone. I didn't want to take my life, but I didn't want to be there. And you were there too. And I remember just you were sobbing, like you're just we were in so much pain. And yet something right kept calling us back. I kept saying, just put your butt in the seat.
Mm,
Just today I can hardly breathe, but I just have to show up. And it's so, oh, I know it's like it was so long ago. And yet, I mean, it's been 20 years for me. I mean, 20, 15 years for me, I think, around that time. And it's just, I loved what you said about those three options.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
never thought of it that way. Yes. I also appreciate you saying the sex is just a means of manipulation because there are also support groups for people that are straight up sex addicts and it doesn't have to do with the validation. I'm sure does, but um love addiction is a different animal in that it's about like that hole in ourselves that we have to fill, and we're looking for other people to fill that for us. So whatever it takes, it's true, yes, sex is beautiful and feels really good, but that's not the thing. It's, for me, it was the connection. It has to, I want to feel desired. I want someone, if they're unfaithful to their spouse, that means I must be worth it. Like which is,
Mhm.
and the justifying. Well, no
Mhm.
one will know, so it won't hurt them. Rather than I know
Yeah,
God, whatever people, like you said, whatever people, whether it's God, higher power, it doesn't matter that your partner doesn't know.
right, right.
It's the integrity. So, yes, please continue this. I just got so emotional listening to
Thank
you.
you so much. It's really amazing to sit here and do this with you
I
because
know. I'm gonna sob.
like
Yeah.
if you had told me, I mean, so many things. If you had, first
Yeah.
of all, if you had told me back then, the person that you met, Shannon, if you had told that Adrienne that one day would be a born again Christian living in Nashville, Tennessee, I would be like, then just kill me now.
Yeah, right. I know.
I must
Um,
have been like brainwashed. That sounds like hell. That sounds like something horrible happened to me. Please, just I don't want that life. And it's
oh my
it's like
God.
the best life. I never could have come up with this life myself, right? But that's what,
Yeah.
that was like God had that plan for me. So how I eventually got to that place, um, okay, so I'm a total atheist, but I start praying and I start doing the spiritual stuff. In LA at that time, in these groups, there was a lot of like new agey stuff. I basically
Yeah.
tried everything. I was open, I was willing to do whatever. And a lot of the stuff that was around was like, oh, there's this person I know is going to a Buddhist chanting thing. So
Yeah.
like, yes, let me try that. I'll sure. Oh, there's a Kundalini yoga thing like around the corner from my apartment in Hollywood. Yeah, I'll go check that out. Oh, there's this like meditation workshop. I'll go do that. Like and I did go back to synagogue, the synagogue that I grew up in Southern California. I went back to that synagogue. I became a member. I started going regularly, like Friday night Shabbat, after not attending for like 20 years. And so I was doing all of those different things. I had maybe one Christian friend at the time who was like a real, like, believing, practicing Christian. And she invited me to church with her and her husband and their family. And so I would like sometimes go with her. Um, I was basically just trying anything and everything. And over the course of that year that I was constantly going to meetings, constantly doing spiritual stuff, not doing any of the addictive behavior that I used to do, no dating, no hooking up, no exchanging phone numbers, like nothing, like no men as an option for the first time in my life since I was 12. The first time I've ever truly been alone while simultaneous and having no contact with my ex-husband, no contact with the ex-boyfriend, and then trying all this spiritual stuff. It was the most painful experience of my life going through this healing and going through this spiritual transformation, but it was also beautiful and it was healing, but it took a long, long, long time. But during that process, I moved from being a complete and total atheist to becoming an agnostic, to believing in some kind of higher power, some kind of God, some kind of universal life force that connects all sentient and non-sentient beings. Like I saw that it was having an effect on me. I saw that it was, positively changing my life, and so I wanted more of it. And I basically was in that seeking place for about a year. Um, and then a friend invited me to see a play of the Screw Tape Letters, which I had never heard of. I didn't know what it was, but I love theater and it was a group activity with friends. And so I said yes. And then we get to the play and I get the program that sort of talks about who the characters are. What's this play I'm about to watch? And the characters are like God and the devil. And I was like, what is this play? What is this? Like, I've no, and, written by C.S. Lewis, like the Chronicles of Narnia guy. I had no idea that I didn't know who C.S. Lewis was, other than he wrote some kids' book. I had no idea C.S. Lewis was a Christian and wrote many, 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 many Christian books. But the lights go down, the curtain comes up, and I'm watching this play. And Shannon, it blew me away. It blew me away. For those of you, for anybody who, or if you don't know what the Screw Tape Letters is, like I didn't, I had no idea. It's basically a story about spiritual warfare. And this idea of, the little angel and the little devil that like sit on your shoulder and like whisper in your ear, like that's actually a thing that is real and that is happening. And that the whole play is basically about this demon who is, a very high-ranking official in the underworld, and he's coaching his young demon nephew how to properly tempt humans, how to be the best little devil on the shoulder that he can possibly be. So he's writing him these letters. His name is Screwtape. Screwtape is writing these letters to his nephew, Wormwood, the little demon, coaching him how to properly tempt and manipulate and whisper in the ear of his human patients. And it just resonated with me so, so strongly. I identified with it. And it was sort of the first time that it occurred to me that I wasn't just fucked up.
Yeah.
That like my whole life, or for so many years, I thought like, well, I'm just a mess and I'm depressed and I have an eating disorder and I'm this and I'm that. And, it was like the first time that the idea occurred to me that like, what if it's not you? What if there's like a dark force that's actually trying to hurt you and like get in your ear and get in your head and manipulate you? And there's nothing wrong with you. That was really powerful to like consider that. For whatever reason, this play just hit me, and I was in such a seeking open place, and I was seeking God, and I knew I wanted more God, but I wasn't quite getting it from all of those other things I was trying. And then I go to this play and I just sort of became curious. Again, very resistant and very reluctant, because I would literally like, God, I'll do anything, but please not Jesus. Like, I'm going to synagogue. I'll be a Jew. I will do Buddhist stuff. I was even doing Sufi healings. Like, I'll do Sufism. But Jesus, like, oh no, 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 I don't want it to be Jesus. But there was something there that felt like I had to at least explore it, right? Because I was in such a seeking place. So, and then God was really beautiful and gracious in the way that, like, the woman who invited me to the play, I was like, hey, can I talk to you about this? And, went to her house and ordered Thai food and sat on her couch until 1 a.m. talking about Jesus, even though it made me want to crawl out of my skin.
Yeah.
And then God just kept putting people like, now go have coffee with this person, now talk to this person, now this pastor psychologist who lives in Chicago is offering to talk to you on the phone once a week free of charge, just because he cares about this, you exploring Christianity. And again, everything in me was like, no, I don't want to do
Mhm.
that. But I had gotten into such a habit over the last like year and a half at this point of, being in program and just saying yes to the next right indicated action, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. And so I did. And I really started exploring Christianity, as uncomfortable as it made me. That, but it resonated so much within me. It just was like truth. Every time I read something, every time I talked to somebody, you know, I I eventually did start going to church by myself. That made me very uncomfortable the first time I did it. The first time I did it, I felt like I was rejecting my family and my heritage and my, Jewish identity, and it was very uncomfortable. But God had been so sweet and gracious in this whole previous year of, this spiritual transformation, and he continued to do that as I explored Christianity. And um, a few months in, I was, getting ready for work one day. I was listening to Christian music. I was just such a different person than who I had been a year and a half earlier. And it occurred to me that if somebody asked, "Are you a Christian?" I would have had to say yes at that point. Like, I believe that Jesus is God, and I believe it. I believe it. I believe that it's true. And then it really just continued to shape the rest of my life. I found a church that I started attending regularly, which, happens to be where I met my current husband. We met at a Bible study. Um, he's, a believing Christian. And we were friends for several months before we went on a date. But then on our first date, he was the one who said, I don't believe in sex outside of marriage. And
That's
he's,
new.
yeah, I mean, he's a believing Christian, and like that's what he believes is right. And even as he told me, like as he was saying it, he was like, shut up, why are you saying it?"
That's cute.
But and I told him, that I was a sex and love addict, and that was my past, and I'm totally fine with no sex outside of marriage. Now, again, if you had told me that day
Oh,
one,
yeah.
day 100, of going into those groups, I would have been like, I'm out, like, no way,
Yeah.
not doing that. But Brent and we dated for a year, and then we got engaged, and we were engaged for 4 months and planned a quick wedding, and we got married. And we waited until our wedding night. We did not have sex until our wedding night. And like, as a former sex and love addict who had, one night stands and all that stuff, it's like, I mean, if that's not God transforming me in my life, then I don't know what is.
Yeah, I love your story, especially because it really, excuse me, is a testament to remaining open. I too was always, I went through phases. I don't know. I don't think I was an atheist, but like you, my parents took me to all the churches to try because I asked. I was curious. My
Mm,
parents were not into it, but they were like, we'll do it for you. So my mom's like, if you want to learn about the Bible, here's the Bible. You make your own decision. And she never said, well, we don't believe that. She said, some people believe. And then she said we settled on Unitarian Church because she didn't enjoy the Methodist where my friend Andrea went, and that's why I wanted to go there.
mhm,
And we did she's like, "But let's go to" she liked the idea of community. It's like, "Let's go to the
mhm.
Unitarian Church," where I was Rosa Parks in the Christmas pageant because we lived in Westport, Connecticut, which is pretty, non-diverse.
Right.
Although the Unitarian Church was next to the temple, in the same parking lot. But I love the idea too, because I think I too always had this when it came to people talking about Jesus, or I was like, stop.
Mm.
And I'd love to actually ask you too, because
Yes, please.
I've changed my belief on that too. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, but I now am able to have like now I'm able to embrace all of it.
Mhm.
And there's no more fear about it. But I'd love to know what you think that's about and why people do have this sort of fear or I and I'll speak for myself, I felt like people were pushing it on
Yeah,
others,
sure.
and I love now that my Christian friends are able to share about it we're able to have discussions without it. I don't feel there's no threat. It's
Right.
I embrace, "Tell me more. I wanna
Yeah.
learn." I'm interested in how you came to this, but I'd love to know what you think about why people are so the way that we were about it.
Yes, yes.
Like,
So
"Keep that away from me."
yes, I think there's a few things. One, I was very, very much that way.
Yeah.
When I was an atheist when I was younger, I think I felt that way about pretty much everything,
Yeah.
any kind of spirituality, but especially Christianity and
Same.
Jesus. I mean, anytime that somebody tried to like come up to me or have a conversation with me or let me tell you what Jesus has done for me, I was like, you better get that
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
like I was like hostile toward it.
Yeah.
I did. And so now I think I have more of an understanding of what that's about for me as an atheist. It's like, or as a former atheist when I
Yeah.
felt that way. Um, so I believe that Jesus and Christianity are not just subjectively true for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
I think it is objectively true for everyone.
Right.
I think that that truth is so offensive for a lot of
Yeah.
people. I understand, like, the fact that you say that you're very open, you don't have a problem with it. It's like, tell me more. I'm curious. Like, I think that is so beautiful and so commendable. And I think, a lot of people have a very hard time with that. I think, and there's something about this being confronted with the truth or being confronted with the light where it's very hard to be um I don't know, like to not take a stance on it, to just be like, whatever, live and let live. It's like you either like
Yeah,
embrace it or reject it. I think that is for the case with just humans, and I think that that's understandable, that that's the way that we react. Um, I remember I did have a moment with my mentor, with my sponsor, when I was exploring Christianity and going through this continuation of my spiritual transformation. And we weren't like arguing, but we were, talking about it because I was sharing about these like revelations that I was having and this new thought process I was having about God and, truth and she was saying, you know, she was like, I just prefer the more inclusive view that all ways lead to God. There is no one right way. Christianity is fine, Judaism is fine, Buddhism is fine, like whatever it is, Sufism, like that they're all equal, they're all valid, and that that's a better way to be. And I said, yes, but you're saying that that's the right way to be,
which
right?
is precisely, yeah, that's the
And
problem.
I'm
Yeah,
just saying, I think this is the right way to be. And she was like, yes, I see what you're saying, but I still just think that my way is more inclusive.
right.
And we kind of had to just get off the phone because it was getting like a little too uncomfortable. And I remember hanging up the phone and crying and being so scared that I might lose her, that she might say,
Yeah.
like, I'm done with this. But I remember saying out loud, I was like, Jesus, I believe, like, I believe, I believe, I believe. And like, no matter what happens, I really don't want to lose this person in my life. But if I have to lose her for you, I will. I will lose anything and everything for you, Jesus. And so I understand the discomfort. I understand people have a very hard time with, they see Christianity as very rigid and very like, you think that's the right way to be. And what I came to realize is we all think there's a right way to be.
Exactly.
The atheist thinks this is the right way to be.
Yes.
The agnostic who thinks, we can't really know, thinks that that's the right way to be. Like the person who thinks all ways are equal, the person who's Jewish, the person who's Muslim, like every single person, no matter what your stance is, it is a stance. And Christianity is a stance just as much as any of the other ones are a stance. It's just we have that one. The other thing about people forcing it on you, I understand because I experienced that and I really dislike it. And I really, really don't like I still don't like when people do it. I try to do it in a way that's sharing. This is my experience.
Inspiring.
Yeah, it's like, let me tell you what Jesus has done for me. Like, I'm not like, I do believe it's true. I do believe it's objectively true, but this is my experience. Um, and I think that the reason people share about it is because it's literally the greatest news that the greatest gift they've ever received in the universe. It's the only reason, it's like the primary purpose for existence and everything and the greatest gift. And they just want everyone to be a part of it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
if you go to a great restaurant, if you got a great deal on this piece of clothing at this store, you want to like share it with people like, oh my gosh, you have to see this thing, or you have to see this movie, or you have to try this restaurant. It's like that times a billion,
Mhm.
So that's why people can't shut up about it, and why, unfortunately, they go about it the wrong way because they want to tell you you need a savior. There's a savior, like, but most our culture is like, I don't need a savior. And they're like, no, 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 you do. Let me show you how sinful you are.
Right. Yeah.
Prove to you that you need a savior, which is so,
Yeah.
has not worked out great. Now, when I was first becoming a Christian, there's this great line. I think it's attributed to St. Augustine, but I could be wrong, which says, preach the gospel. If necessary, use words.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's
Right?
living through example. And I love too about you that you did try other things
Oh,
to
yes.
find your own truth. You
Yes.
aren't going on, this is just the thing. I mean, you really were like, I'll explore this. I'll explore this. I actually am Jewish. I was born Jewish and I was born into a Jewish family and I respect that tradition. And I think that's what's so not, I don't know, nice. That's not the word, but I think that's important.
Yeah,
In
because
yeah,
look, there are plenty of people who don't have my experience. And there are people who have explored Christianity, or they grew up in Christianity and then they left it or they rejected it
yeah,
or whatever. Um, but yes, it's not like I just grew up believing this or being told it and then and
yeah,
then that's what I believe. It's like I really came to it on the other thing I want to say about that, as somebody who was an atheist and who believed in rationality and reason and logic, God had to prove himself. Jesus had to prove himself to me intellectually.
yeah.
And God was like, honey, I invented rationality. Not the problem. And he proved himself to me. Intellectually, not just because I had a feeling, not just because I got goosebumps, there's that
Yeah,
too.
there is that too. Yeah.
But it was and then I started, reading the Bible and studying the Bible with people. Again, I understand, as somebody who came from, Judaism, atheism, and then exploring New Age spirituality, like how just that it sounds like I get it. I
Yeah.
felt that way. The first time I went out to lunch with this Christian girl, I was like exploring Christianity and she invited me to lunch and she just like put the Bible on the table in the middle of California kitchen. And I was mortified. I was and she's just talking, well, in Matthew 12, it says this, and that. And I'm like, I'm wanting to crawl out of my skin. It made
Yeah.
me so uncomfortable. Um, so I get it. I get what it sounds like. But I just have to be honest and be like, now I'm on the other side of it. And I love the Bible and I love Jesus more than anything. And even though my husband and this is our 10-year,
Wow.
yeah, this October will be 10 years that we're celebrating our 10-year wedding anniversary. And I love him so much. We have a better, healthier relationship than I've ever had with anyone. My first real healthy relationship. And the only reason it works is because he loves Jesus more than he loves me. And I love Jesus more than I love him. I have to. It's hard as like a sex and love addict. Like I want him to be my like meaning
Yeah.
and identity and
Yeah.
everything, but he's not. He can't, because he'll fail me. And we fail each other on a daily basis. And like that's the thing that's so beautiful about Christianity is like I'm a bad mom. I'm not. Like
You're
I'm a
not.
good
I
mom.
know.
I'm a good mom. But like I'm a bad mom and I'm a bad wife and I'm just like a bad selfish, self-centered person. And here's the thing, there's no guilt about it. There's no
Right.
guilt,
You're
no shame.
human.
I'm human and I am completely forgiven and loved and accepted. Like there's I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but there's a pastor who's now deceased. He passed away, but his name is Tim Keller. And you can listen to his sermons online. I've listened to like every single one that exists because he's super intellectual, sounds like a college professor, is constantly quoting Nietzsche and, Kant and like philosophers and very, very heady and intellectual, which, speaks to me. Um, but he said the way he puts it is like, you are more sinful and depraved than you can even imagine, but you are more loved and cherished and precious than you could dare dream simultaneously at the same time. And I think that Christianity is kind of the only worldview that is able to encapsulate all of the brokenness, all of the sinfulness, while simultaneously giving hope and love and grace and redemption. Um, and the best thing about it, well, I don't know if it's the best thing, but is that it's not up to me.
Yeah.
It's not that I have to work hard. It's not that I have to meditate more, pray more, be better, do good, say affirmations, like, like that it's up to me to fix myself, because I can't fix myself. And to rest in that, like, let go and let God, that, like, God has got me in his hands and he's taking care of it. And I started to understand that even before Christianity, like going through, this program for sex and love addicts. Like, I remember, if you remember, we were on the phone all the time. Like, I was constantly
Yeah.
on the phone with people having these phone calls. And I remember saying to this one girl, like, you don't have to be strong. You can let God be strong for you. And I had that understanding even before Jesus and Christianity, like, I understood that, like, I mean, that's step one, two, and three. Like, I
Yeah.
can't, he can, I think I'll let him, you know?
Oh, I love the way that I hadn't heard it worded like that, but that's I think I'll let him. I think that's beautiful because I was more on the well, agnostic, for sure agnostic. I don't want to say there were times I was an atheist for sure. I
Mhm.
remember in college saying you die and you turn to dust. That's literally what I thought. And I was smoking cigarettes out the window, wanting to take my life because some guy, like some guy dumped me and I couldn't go on. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing that I went into that program acting as if. Someone said to me,
Mm.
"Okay, fine, if you don't believe in God, like the biblical God, then it could be a doorknob." I mean, that's a little reductive, but it's like it doesn't
Hey,
matter.
if
Well,
it'll get you
yeah,
there, like,
it got me there because what you just said is that when I think people sometimes are afraid to say I'm powerless. Because they're
mhm,
like, "Oh, no, no, no. Don't tell me I'm powerless. I can fix things. I can manage this. I can control it." And I've done it myself, and I've watched other people, addicts in my life do it.
yeah,
I won't and I wasn't an alcoholic, but I, have, like, been around that a lot, and there's the, "I'm not gonna go to AA, but I will only drink on Tuesdays or Wednesdays." It's the managing and controlling, and it's like, slowly you watch them descend, like 'cause you can't that's when we what we mean by powerless. It doesn't mean you don't
right,
have free will. It doesn't mean that you can't make better choices for yourself or that you can't white knuckle it through. You can,
yeah,
but I loved the idea, and I would do this even though I didn't know if I believed in God, which I do now, but, I just would tell myself, act as if. So when you're feeling
right,
hopeless or scared or in fear or like acting out, just picture these big hands around you, holding you like a little baby, like these gigantic hands, and just put yourself in the little womb of God's hands. Imagine it. What if there was this being greater than us that could hold you and cradle you and
uh,
just give it up to
yeah,
that power? And that's what worked. So
yeah,
again, not to be preachy, but giving it up and realizing, yes, you have some control, but that's the problem. Addicts need to control. And that's why we do the things that we do because we are grasping for something outside of ourselves that's
yeah,
like a person or a drug or like a physical drug to make ourselves to self soothe.
yep,
And now it's about, doesn't mean we don't still have anxiety or depression or we don't stress out about things,
yeah,
but it's about saying, I don't have control over this, and if the more I try to have control, the messier it's gonna get. Things
right,
are gonna get really messy really
yeah.
fast, and
We
I
still have
yeah,
to we still have to show up and do our part and, like,
yes,
take the next right action and put one foot in front of the other. It doesn't mean you just throw up your hands and say, "Well, I
right,
guess God's in control, so I don't have to do anything." It's like the way that another mentor of mine who I used to study the Bible with, the way that she explained it to me was like, you have to show up and do your measly 100%. And then God takes care of the rest.
Yeah.
And you let go of the outcome. That can be the really hard part, right? Is like you still do the right thing, but ultimately you know that you are powerless and you can't control what's going to happen with other people, places, and things. Like you just can't, you know? And so the good thing is that all other people, places, and things will fail you. And they can't save you and they can't give you your ultimate meaning and identity and purpose. So, things come and go, money comes and goes, jobs come and go, like health comes and goes. I mean, like in the end, we don't all turn to dust, but everything in this world is temporary
Yeah.
and is fleeting. And so you can't really put your ultimate hope in any of it because
Yeah.
it's not going to last. Um and there is, I think before I had God, that made me depressed.
Yeah.
And now that I have God, that gives me peace because I'm like, oh, I don't have to try to find identity in any of those things. If all of that's taken away from me, and one day it will be, and I'm left with really the sole purpose for my existence and the most important thing in the universe, which is God and my relationship with God, then I'm good. And that's hard to live out on like a day-to-day basis because we get caught up in like the world
Oh,
and
yeah.
money and jobs and that, that's normal. That's normal. But like I still always try to come back to that. I still always try to remind myself that like I don't try to freak myself out that my whole family is going to get hit by a bus one day and like scare myself about it. But it's this sort of like reality, or like, I don't know, this like thing that I do where I'm like, look, that happens to people, good
Yeah.
people, like every day, and does God still exist? Is God still good if that happens? Because it does happen. And I don't know, it just, even if, here's the other thing, even if it's totally made up and it is all a fairy tale, it's a way better way to live life. I can say, as somebody who's lived it on both sides, and this way is just so much more peaceful and fulfilling, and not striving and not aching and not longing and struggling. I still struggle with like the things of life and this world and stuff, but even if it's all made up, it still just serves me and my life so much better than the way I was living before.
That is such a perfect wrap up. I I almost don't even want to speak after that, but I just want to say that I say that all the time. Even if I'm wrong, even if it turns out that you just do die and turn to dust,
Yeah.
I would rather have the faith. I have trust tattooed on my wrist to remind myself. I have chills too while I'm saying all this. So it's being affirmed, even if I'm wrong,
Yep.
even if it's all an illusion. And
Yep.
even if, all of these near death experiencers I've interviewed on my other podcast, just it was all an illusion. And,
Yeah.
like it was all just the brain chemicals.
Yes. Totally.
I
Fine.
it has taken the fear out of death for me. It lets me live a different way. It lets me live in a let go, let God, which I would have cringed saying that out loud years ago. I would have cringed at the hand holding in the support groups and the chant, the mantras. And now I'm like, no, let go and let God. It's my favorite quote. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
And the serenity prayer. It's
Yes.
all, it just, hey, let it go, man. Like life is really hard and it's beautiful. There's
Yeah.
so many terrible things that happen. If I didn't have the faith that I have, oh, I wouldn't wanna be here.
Yeah.
I'd want out. And so, I love the way that you said that, like, if it's a fairy tale, I'd rather believe in fairy tales.
That's right. It's the most beautiful fairy tale that exists, if that's what it is.
Yes. Yeah, and it makes life so much more beautiful to
Yeah.
to have that understanding. So, Adrienne, you are incredible, and I'm so happy that you agreed to join me and to share your very personal story. And I know that lots of people will find value in it. So, thank you for doing this, for being of service. This is a way of being of service in such a great way.
Totally my pleasure. It's a total blessing. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Still Standing. If it resonates with you, it would mean the world if you can subscribe, like, share with anyone you think might benefit from listening to these stories. And I just wanted to end on this note. What is commonly called falling in love is in most cases an intensification of egoic wanting and needing. You become addicted to another person, or rather to your image of that person. It has nothing to do with true love, which contains no wanting whatsoever.